Welcome back to SwitchCorner. Today we're going to be taking a look at Shing on the Nintendo Switch. It's the latest 2.5D brawler to join the Switch library, but does it do enough to stand alongside the greats? Well, that's what I'm here to find out, so hit subscribe if you love the Switch, as much as we all do here. Join our growing family, and let's get started. So first up, a story. It is minimal stuff, and I'd be surprised if anyone was going into this one expecting, the next Spike Lee joint or Tarantino. The idea, it's summed up in the opening seconds. A magical stone by the name of Starseed. It's been stolen by an invading alien-like enemy, and now you and your band of warriors, you must get out there and get it back. This crew, it's made up of 4 characters: Tetsuo, Eiko, Bachiko, and Wilhelm. There's a few minor twists along the way, but I enjoyed it overall. It was simple stuff, and the characters then, they have some good, if immature, sense of humour to them. So gameplay on this one, it's trading out the usual punches and kicks for weapon-based combat, with each of the 4 characters coming in with a pre-assigned weapon. Between the 4 playable characters, it's the usual setup, so think differences in speed and strength. Having pre-assigned weapons though, it means one thing you may miss: no interactable weapons to pick up in this world. You start with a weapon, and that never really changes throughout the entire game. Gameplay wise though, the usual idea: move from screen to screen, take out waves of enemies, and then face off against the occasional boss. You can expect 7 different locations to explore, and these are made of 2 levels each. The runtime, it is decent for the genre. For me, my first playthrough, it took me around 4 hours, and there's still plenty for me to go back for. So think they're like hidden secrets known as lore and high scores to chase that can be compared locally or online. Sadly though, online here, it's scores and that's it. The gameplay, it's up to 4 players locally only. So replayability then, it comes not only from that high score chasing, but also then challenges as well. You can work through these and think things like get a 20 chain combo, and then as well, of course, difficulty options, and we're getting 4 here. So this is all good, but how does it control? And we get 2 options here in an attempt to stand out what is, in, let's face it, a crowded market, and I think it honestly works. That's because, of course, it has the traditional setup, so think, attacks associated to the face buttons, but the preset, it actually sees you using the right stick to control your swing. Different movement with the right stick creates a different attack, and the whole combat here, it's built around the idea of height, so think a high, low, and mid-level slash. You can also then slash them up into the air to juggle them, or simply, slam them back down. So complementing the weapon-based combat then, of course, we get more traditional kind of moves. We get a jump, a melee, a dash, which actually makes you invincible, so do get good with that. And then a block, which doubles as a parry if timed right. In the standard moveset, what I missed the most was the fact it lacked any sort of, grab and throw maneuver. I also missed weapon pickups as well, but later in the game, you will start to get power-ups, so think like bombs you can drop when you dash, a power-up that sets your sword on fire, and then also one that almost shoots bullets. The final move here then, there is a special. Basically, there's a rage meter that fills underneath your health bar. Fill it, and then you can unleash a quick combo of brutal attacks against your chosen foe with a couple of inputs. For controls, I did enjoy both methods, and I jumped between them frequently, but the right stick method, it is cool. It's definitely a quick paced game, but I'd be lying if I didn't tell you it does get a bit exhausting on the hands. The final piece for controls, I guess, and I found this really interesting: if you're playing single player, you can freely jump between the 4 warriors with the press of a D-pad. So if one character dies, you can actually move on to the next one. It's not just game over. It's basically a really kind of cool way to give you 4 lives. So this is all good and well, controls are of course important, but how are the enemies you face? Repetitive. I know that's typical for the genre, but for this one, it's near instant from the first couple of minutes. It's like the kind of change the color, vary the attack slightly, and that's about it. Some creative designs still that play into the, high, low, mid attacks and parry, think things like shields and projectiles, but I think a little more variety would have gone, a long way. This is very much a Streets of Rage setup, meaning you'll beat a mid-level boss, and then then they will become a frequently faced foe, so you're going to need to get used to them. I actually enjoyed their attack patterns, all that good stuff. I just wish there was more of like a core set of bad guys to face off against, and they upped that count more frequently. Towards the end game it felt great, but the beginning it can be a little slow. So boss moments then finally, the mix is good here in both the way they attack but also the concept. An early one, you're actually protecting a city from waves of enemies, not just one kind of opponent. Later in the game though, maybe a towering mechanical beast. It always had a surprise around the corner, which is a good thing given they could have just been, repeats of overpowered generic soldiers. So this far, I think it's been relatively positive outside of some of that repetition. So let's take a look at the negative. And this one has two glaring issues. First, the frame rate's a bit of a disaster. Starting the game instantly, you will feel a variable frame rate. Typically, it's moving somewhere between 25 to 40 frames per second. But the more busy the screen gets, the lower it's going to drop. A couple of times I even went as low as 16. This sort of experience, it needs to be locked. You can't feel like the game is against you. Fast combat means fast deaths, so you need pinpoint accuracy, and I just didn't unfortunately get that here. In an interview actually, the team said, behind this game it needs to be 60 locked, so this is really a shame to see. I think they need to focus on at least giving us a locked 30 in a future patch, because I promise you that's going to be better than variable. Then, and honestly, I was having a great time with this game to the point where I was actually pretty forgiving of the frame rate, but crashes began, and in total I had 7 of them. 1 on the 3rd level, 4 on the penultimate boss, and then finally 2 on the final stage. They get worse towards the end game, and it was brutal on that 6th boss, having to kind of restart over and over again. In level it's not so bad because the game has a great autosave system, so I didn't really lose progress, but the boss moment, seriously frustrating. This game has a lot of charm and a lot going for it, but right now they need to work towards just delivering us something that is stable on the performance front. So graphically speaking, really impressed. The 2.5D, just overall look, really clean. It has this cartoon vibe while still delivering brutal violence, enemies are getting decapitated all over the place. Then each of the 7 locations, nice and varied, from traditional desert locations to water raft style to ice covered landscapes. Each of the 7 just felt different, and then even the 4 core characters, they each come with some seriously unique and over-the-top animations. I always looked as powerful as I felt. I can also see at points why the frame rate struggles, because I gotta say there's quite a bit going on in these worlds. They've brought a lot of life into the locations, and I was really impressed with that. Enemies then, they're not quite as impressive, but they have some good tells to figure out patterns. I just, as I said earlier, wish there was more of them. Menus then, all that good stuff, nice and clean, simple to use, and there's a really nice overworld map between levels to select that next stage. There's the odd bit of pixelation here and there, and some of the animations, it won't be for everyone. It has this almost stuttered look to it at times, especially when you're attacking an enemy. But yeah, in motion, I thought it looked a whole lot more impressive than the eShop may have suggested with its stills. Full transparency then, in the video you may see the occasional enemy sticking on screen, a few kind of minor glitches. This is being patched out with a promised day 1 update for some minor graphical issues, but none of it, I gotta say, really bothered me, and I'm not sure if I really would have called it out too much. It wasn't the end of the game or anything. Finally, audio, I'm really impressed. They've got a lot going on here. Weapons sound nice and powerful. All our heroes, they're fully voice acted. Not too repetitive either, there's a lot of one-liners in here and I didn't hear too much the same. And then the music, really good stuff. I'd happily listen to this soundtrack offline because the 7 unique locations has led them to 7 very different styles of music, and it's clear a lot of passion went in. Not much then in the way of environmental effects, but honestly, this delivered more than I typically expect of the genre, so that's always a good thing. So the final verdict, and this one, it's a weird one. I was having a great time. I was battling against a variable frame rate that performed mostly between 25 and 40. It did still drop though, as I said, but I was still having a blast. Then the crashes kicked in, and it's now hard for me to get behind recommending this one to you, given the fact it took me 4 attempts to get through the 6th boss. It could be for you the first time, you're absolutely fine, no issues, but it could also be unlimited for all we know. I did it by dialing the difficulty down to easy so I could get through it as quickly as possible. This isn't just a bug, but honestly, I was close to throwing in the towel and just calling it a day. That's not a good place to be, but at the same time, I don't want to call it a bad game because I see a lot of potential and I still had fun. Just in its current build, you're gonna need a whole lot of patience. Sadly though, it is near game breaking, and while I'm not willing to call it a bad game, as I said, it is below average still in its current state. So that's a 4 out of 10 from me. If it was just the frame rate alone, this would have easily probably been maybe a 6 out of 10, slightly above average. If they could patch the frame rate though and get rid of these crashes, I'd probably call this one honestly a good 7 out of 10. Unfortunately though, it is releasing what it seems to be at least before it is ready, and I can only score on what experience I had personally and what I played. Hopefully I can revisit this one very soon and give it the score it absolutely deserves. With that then, like a shout out to the patrons of the channel who are just going above and beyond to support SwitchCorner. Helps more than you know, so thank you all so much. If you do want to check that out for yourself, I have linked it in the video description down below. Then hit subscribe if you love the Switch, as much as we all do here. Join our growing family, and I'll see you all on the next video. Thanks everyone.